What's going on, guys? So we've got some interesting news to talk about. First off, in South Korea, Bitcoin's price plunged. This was basically due to liquidity issues due to a martial law announcement over there. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about Hut8 and Mara. They announced some news. We'll look at their charts as well. And basically what happened the other day was there was a disappearance of key market players. They had a liquidity crisis. This caused Bitcoin to briefly drop all the way to about $65,000 USD. There's basically an announcement of martial law, but that was retracted shortly after, and it caused some insane panic out there. That might be partly what is causing a little bit of fear in Bitcoin recently, besides just finding some resistance at that 100K psychological level. We also saw some selling from the US that might also be inciting a little bit of fear. But basically the reason why this happened in South Korea was because of the Korean market is just shockingly hard to enter the Korean market and trade there. There was also a lot of sell pressure because of that news announcement, because of that fear. However, hours after this martial law declaration, lawmakers in South Korea nullified the order, and following that news, Bitcoin went back where it belongs, trading at the price the rest of the world is trading at. As said here, South Korea's cryptocurrency market is very vulnerable. If we see more political instability, we might see something like this again, a little bit of short-term fear. Now, keep in mind, in my opinion, I'm always a believer in following the cycle. Things can always play out differently based on certain news that we get, things that we're not even accounting for potentially. You never know what kind of news you're going to get over the next 3 to 6 months, even longer. Some good, some bad news. And who knows what happens in 2025? Does the US adopt Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset? There's a lot of craziness that can happen. But in my opinion, regardless of what happens, following the cycle, in my opinion, is going to be key. The market will end on some crazy good news. People will be saying, why is Bitcoin dropping? We just had this amazingly good news. So remember to follow the cycle. The bull market will end on some great news. Just remember to keep a level head. Now, I do want to talk about some Bitcoin miner news. We have Hut8. They launched a $500 million share offering, but also with that, they also announced a $250 million stock repurchase. You get a little bit of bad news, but then there's like a light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to dilute you 500 million, but of that 500 million, we're going to buy back some of those shares down the road. I think they try to do this to kind of soften the blow, but I also think strategically it's kind of smart. If these Bitcoin miners do experience a good bull run like we expect, it would be smart of them to buy their shares, to buy as many shares as they can. I do think a lot of these Bitcoin miners will still outperform Bitcoin. Some, even with the hard pullbacks that the miners experienced, have still and are still outperforming Bitcoin from the bear market low. I think the Bitcoin miners buying their own shares, one, gives a sign of confidence, of course, but two, they might see more gains than those that are just simply holding Bitcoin. I'll leave this down below for you, but basically this buyback allows them to purchase 4.68 million shares, or about 5% of their outstanding stock, over the next year. Now, looking at Hut on the chart, it's following a clear pattern. It is finding resistance on this megaphone pattern, you can call it, and it is utilizing the bottom as support still. One thing you'll see that's very clear is a bearish divergence. You'll see that the RSI has been just dropping like a cliff while the price is rising. There's a bearish divergence. This may be a sign of reversing. I wouldn't be surprised to see us potentially take out some of these gaps down here, testing moving averages before we recover, before we go on our next run, before we break out of this resistance here. If you guys saw my CleanSpark video yesterday, you'll know that the end of the halving year is when the Bitcoin miners run. Maybe things play out differently, of course, but based on the past, based on last cycle, the Bitcoin miners do run to end the year in December. They also run in January and February before a major correction. And keep in mind, back here, Hut8 did have some gaps that weren't filled until the next cycle. So, just because there's gaps down here doesn't mean they have to be filled necessarily, but at some point they probably will, whether it's in the next couple days to weeks or whether it's next cycle. So if we do start pulling back, this would be great opportunities to buy these gap fills as we finish off our crypto bull run. One thing about Hut8 is they did actually report a profit in Q3. What's also funny is they're expecting a loss in Q4, which I just find insane considering Bitcoin's price during both periods. I'm definitely going to look more into that. What's also funny is they're expecting a decrease in revenue. While others are expecting massive increase in revenue, for example, CleanSpark's expecting a $30 to $40 million increase quarter over quarter, we have Hut8 expecting a drop in revenue. But they posted a profitable quarter for the earnings they just reported, while CleanSpark did not. There has definitely got to be some major nuances in the earnings report. But I'd follow this pattern and look for some good entry points. I wouldn't be chasing right here necessarily. I don't hold Hut8 and I probably won't. But if I were to look for some entry points, I would start looking for around 20. start looking for the fill of these gaps. One's at 20 and one is at 17, 16. Maybe we fill one and not the other. Maybe we fill both. Maybe we fill neither. One thing you could do, of course, this applies in my opinion to all the Bitcoin miners, is you could just DCA with plans of exiting within about 6 months or so, 3 to 6 months, even better, and just kind of swing trade them. Now we also have Mara news. They received a buy rating from H.C. Wainwright, and as of recently, it's good to see these price increases. I would take what the analysts say as a grain of salt. I wouldn't necessarily hold them to these price targets, but if they understand the cycle, I'd say they know what they're doing here. Bro, what the H.C. Wainwright gives Mara a $28 price target. I think it will go higher by the end of the cycle. There's only an 11.5% upside. I think a lot of these analysts don't pay attention to the cycle at all. In a lot of ways, they're oblivious to the cycle, but not in all cases necessarily. But I'll leave this down below for you. It does have some other outdated news like insiders selling and buying, institutional inflows and outflows. A lot of this is somewhat outdated though, so to me it's not worth mentioning. And looking at Mara on the chart, they're expected upcoming earnings, they're expecting huge growth in revenue, although an unprofitable quarter still, and they did report unprofitability for Q3. I personally do think a lot of these Bitcoin miners are going to surprise us and post Q4 profitability. We do have the rest of December to see where Bitcoin goes. If Bitcoin does recover and gets over 100K, all the better. I think a lot of these Bitcoin miners are playing it safe. You know, they know Bitcoin has run a lot in this quarter. They think Bitcoin, if it pulls back and they expect profitability but don't get it, that will be a huge negative reaction. The better thing to do is expect unprofitability and have a surprise to profitability. Kind of like what we saw earlier before the halving. A lot of these Bitcoin miners were expecting unprofitability and they posted profitability, which was kind of a surprise, and that kind of kicked off the rally early 2024. But looking at Mara, you know, this is the same story with all the Bitcoin miners. They run at the end of the halving year, 2020 end year, they rallied even into January and February. I do expect similar, especially based on where we came from. Mara does have 3 levels that it needs to crack. First off, this roughly $26, $27 level, which it did recently break, but it fell right back through it, didn't even try to use it as a support, but it has been a resistance in the past. Also, this $30 psychological level, that's an important one, as well as 34. If we can break these resistances, Mara will be hitting new 52-week highs. Will it break all-time high this cycle? I have no clue. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. I do think it is sure to break the February level of $34 though, and we are going to set new 52-week highs. But let me just show you, even with Mara here, you'll see that they expected an unprofitable quarter, but they reported a profit. I do think some will surprise us in Q4. If you think about where Bitcoin has been throughout Q4, Bitcoin has been well over an average of 70-something thousand Bitcoin. Price probably even more like the 80,000s. If we hold up in December, if we hold the 90s throughout December, it brings our average price throughout Q4 even higher. That helps the Bitcoin miners. And in my opinion, we will see some post-profitable quarter, although they aren't necessarily expecting it. Kind of like what we saw pre-halving when they started reporting profitability, while very few necessarily expected it. To me, these are the last buying opportunities for the Bitcoin miners. As many of you know, and as I've said multiple times, 2025, in my opinion, will be the time to sell, will be the time to take profit, will not be the time to buy, unless it's very short term. But what's your plan, guys? Are you following the cycle? Do you think things will play out differently because of the spot Bitcoin ETFs and potential institutional adoption? Are the bear market's going to be more calm? In my opinion, we will still experience bear markets. Whether it's an 80% correction or a 50% correction, we will still experience them. And these are going to be the golden opportunities again to load up. How many of you wish you could go back to 2022, 2023 and load up on MicroStrategy, load up on Bitcoin, load up on the Bitcoin miners? Buy Bitcoin back when it was 15,000, 20,000. Those days are gone. We will never be able to buy Bitcoin for 15, 20,000, maybe not 30,000, maybe not 40,000. Maybe not 50,000 ever again. Next cycle, our low could be somewhere around here. Our low next cycle could be the 70,000 cycle top that we experienced. So remember, when the bear markets come, take advantage of them. Build up your cash pile during the good times. Get ready for the bad times and buy the assets that you love. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.